FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 5/5/20. Sounds like a numerologically significant date, but who knows? That's not my thing, numerology. I've never quite understood it. But markets interesting. Buffett bails on the airline sector. What does that mean? And what about the pending bankruptcies coming up for numerous industries, especially retail? Looks like it's on its way out. Well, for this and more, we've got John Rubino on with us. But first, email us, as always, kl@kerrylutz.com. That's kl@kerrylutz.com. John, happy day here. So the markets, we got stuff going on here that you never thought you'd live through, did you?
Hey, Kerry. Well, no. The whole pandemic thing was always something that was out there as a possibility or a certainty at some point in the future, sort of like the, California falling into the ocean or the Yellowstone supervolcano, stuff that could happen that would be a disaster, but there's no way to time it. And it might not be for 1,000 years, so you don't think of it. But then, boom, this just came out of nowhere and has changed everything. And there's a lot of unhappiness out there right now because there are entire industries that just don't work anymore. And the airlines are a case in point, where Warren Buffett was a big airline industry investor because he likes companies with good brand names and high barriers to entry, which definitely describes the airline industry. If you're United Airlines and you've got most of the good landing slots at O'Hare Airport, for instance, it's hard for anybody new to come in and compete with you, right? So that gives you some pricing power, and you can grow year after year as the industry itself grows. So he likes that kind of an industry. So he had loaded up on airlines, and it just was announced yesterday that he's dumped them all. He came out and said that the environment in which airlines operate has changed in ways he can't predict going forward, and they might be permanent. In other words, we might just not fly nearly as much as we used to. And that completely changes the economics of an airline, for instance, that has a bunch of planes that they paid for, right?
Yes.
And what do you do with them in this world? What do you do with extra airplanes, airliners in this world? Well, what you do is you park them on one of those big, how you see the satellite photos of something 50 times as big as a football field, and it's completely full of cars or airplanes or something like that. Well, that's where they're going to end up. And by the way, cars are also, they're stacked in container ships out in the ocean between markets, because people aren't buying as many cars as they did before. So there's a lot of industries that have just been smacked by the coronavirus. And it's not clear that all of them come back. Some of them probably will, and some of them won't. So now the big challenge for an institutional money manager, for instance, is trying to figure out which is which, which is undervalued because of this, but will recover and is therefore super cheap right now and a really good thing to invest in, and which is going to go out of business, which means at any price, it's a bad investment. And you mentioned the retailers. That's bricks and mortar retailers are probably in the latter category, where a lot of them are just going to cease to exist because they were already heading that way, right?
Yes.
Who goes to department stores anymore? So you were going to see JCPenney and Macy's and Sears for sure, and a few other big names in that industry shrink until they disappear. But now this has speeded up the process where they're not going to get a chance to shrink. They're just going to disappear. And so J. Crew filed for bankruptcy over the weekend, I guess. And there are others that are lining up. Who was the one we talked about it last week?
Needless markup.
Yeah, Neiman Marcus, who was preparing to file. And they're probably just the first of many. in bricks and mortar retailing that will have to go out of business. So this is a big change in the world. And meanwhile, the government is trying to bail everybody out, but they're doing it in kind of a chaotic piecemeal way. Like some industries get direct help, some don't get any help. In some cases, they get help if they keep their payroll on, but they don't get any help with salvaging their business. And so it's really not clear who is getting what and who will be saved by the government and who won't be, and which is to be expected. I mean, this is something that came out of nowhere and is immensely big and complicated. So you wouldn't expect the government to just have a clean set of policies all ready to go. Although on the other hand, maybe you should have expected it, because that's the kind of thing that you make contingency plans for, right? So you would think that somewhere in a drawer in Washington is a plan for a big virus, a pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And here's what we do. We do this, and here's how we help the industries that need help, and here's how we help the people that are thrown out of work, and that it's all just there, already figured out, and, in a time frame and in the magnitude and everything. But I don't think there was anything like that. I think these guys just got caught off guard and have been flying by the seat of their pants ever since. Yeah,
been making it up as they go along.
And are just being insanely ham-handed about a lot of it. The tone deafness, for instance, of this Nancy Pelosi thing, where she invited someone into her house to see how she's doing lockdown. Yeah. And turns out she lives in a mansion with, $12,000 refrigerator full of $12 of a pint ice cream. And so that's her lockdown life. Now, imagine somebody who whose kids can't go to school and who they themselves can't go to work, and they got a little bit of money from the government, but that didn't even cover rent, and now they don't know how they're going to eat for the rest of the month. Imagine somebody like that seeing Nancy Pelosi and what they're going to think. And remember that the Democrat Party is the party of working people. In other words, the people who are most seriously affected by all this. And basically the head of the party at the moment is living like Marie Antoinette, as you said before we went live here. So that is really bad optics.
Let him eat $12 a pint ice cream, and is it the woman is so far gone, or she does't care anymore, or she lost a key person on her staff who took care of not looking like Marie Antoinette, or what?
Well, what it is the political class, and in general the technocratic internationalist class in the U.S. literally don't know that their life isn't normal. Yeah. They think that's just how everybody's living. So come see my ice cream, and I'm sure you have a different brand of ice cream, but a really good brand in your expensive freezer at your house. That's their attitude. And they honestly don't know that a large part of the population is literally starving, or if they're not starving, they're losing their livelihoods. And that's why there are all these protests. A news show, I think it was either MSNBC or CNN, called the protesters who want to go back to work. I think it was in Michigan, and I don't remember the exact term, but it was like a Trumpian death cult or something like that. That's what they called them. And these are people who had jobs and who want to go back to their jobs because they can't feed their family, by and large. They're not making some ideological point. Most of them. Hardly. They're saying, I'm going to die if I don't go back to work. My kids are literally going to starve, and please let me go back to work. That's what they're saying. And, Trump's people are just sitting back and feasting on this, because the mainstream media and the political class in Washington give them new material for attack ads every day, it seems like, right? I mean, this Nancy Pelosi thing is going to be plastered on YouTube and all the major networks until the election. And then same thing with, a Trumpian death cult. They're just going to do these commercials where they say, well, you know what? This is what CNN thinks of you. And this is what Nancy Pelosi thinks lockdown was like. Are you really going to vote for the Democrats under these circumstances? And then you got Biden, who basically single-handedly destroyed the Me Too movement because he just got accused of a fairly credible sexual assault back in the day. At least it's every bit as credible as anything that was thrown at Brett Kavanaugh this time around. But the difference is back then, all the people who were attacking Kavanaugh came out and said, you always believe women, they never lie, and this is a litmus test. Do you believe all of these allegations, or don't you? Because if you don't, you're a sexist pig, Yeah. And now these same people are saying, well, her account just doesn't seem credible, and I know Joe Biden, so I trust Joe Biden, and we've got to give this due process. And so in other words, they're sounding like the Republicans sounded with Brett Kavanaugh, which kind of lays bare the political hypocrisy that exists in our country right now, where your guy can get away with anything and you'll let it slide, but the other side's guy can't get away with anything because anything they do immediately has to be seen in the worst possible light. Republicans and Democrats are, of course, both guilty of it, but it's just amazing. Why would you believe anything any of these guys say anymore when you know that they're saying it for political expediency and not because they actually believe it? Because as soon as the shoe is on the other foot, they're going to believe the opposite of what they're saying right now.
No consistency. And Biden has been a creepy character since I can remember. And I always thought he was just an idiot, not very smart guy, a buffoon, and just a total fool and all around idiot. But now, all of the videos that are up there, and there's dozens on YouTube of him sniffing hair, massaging women's shoulders, not his wife either, and all of these creepy things, John, how could anybody? And then look at his cognitive, diminishment. He's every time you see him, he's less articulate, as if that's possible, and more prone to gaffes. And really, I just have always felt that he's a put-up candidate, that he never had a chance of really winning it. He's just there to beat Bernie and to allow the real candidate who couldn't win in the primaries because it's so far to the left, to allow that person to come forward. Whether you think it's Hillary Clinton, I don't, or Michelle Obama, I don't think that. Maybe it's Bill Gates. They throw up, Nanny Bloomberg, and he gets decimated. And Gates has been in the news all over this pandemic thing. And you got to wonder what his interest is. I mean, supposedly he's been a vaxxer for years and years. He's a eugenicist, allegedly, all these things. I don't know if they're true or not, but I do know that he's become very high profile recently after being extremely low profile for most of the past decade.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. At Silver One's Candelaria Mine project in Nevada, there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver, which Silver One is developing and advancing. The company's Phoenix Silver project, located within the Arizona Silver Belt, is an early-stage exploration project on which native silver vein fragments have been discovered near surface. One grab sample assayed an astounding 14,688 ounces per ton. Yes, that's right, ounces, not grams. Silver One has tremendous exploration potential, is extremely leveraged to the price of silver, and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Bill Gates is the most unlikely supervillain that you could ever design, because he's this nerdy, kind of soft-spoken guy in person. He doesn't scream and yell, and he never, says personal things about anybody else. He's the absolute polar opposite of Donald Trump, personality-wise. And yet, for basically his entire life, he has been feared and hated, because when he was running Microsoft, Microsoft was going to take over the world, and it was this amoral, hyper-competitive, really aggressively borderline criminal company when he was running it. That was the consensus in the tech world. And everybody was terrified of him. And he was the face of the sociopathic version of giant tech companies. And then he disappeared for a while, like you said. Now he's back as the face of the internationalist takeover of the global economy, using vaccines as a means of social control. It's just this. It's totally different from why he was a villain before. Mm-hmm. So he managed to be a villain in kind of two different big ways. I don't know if anybody's ever done that before. Usually, when you're universally hated, it's for kind of one specific thing. But Gates is just, everything he touches turns into some kind of conspiracy to take over the world. So yeah, it's pretty amazing to see how this is going to play out, because the whole vaccine thing is something that is in our future. In other words, they're going to come up with a coronavirus vaccine, and then the battle begins over whether we're going to let these guys, in a mandatory way, vaccinate everybody in the country or everybody in the world. And, Bill Gates actually said something about implanting microchips in people too, right? So they can measure whether they're infected or not. That's to a segment of the population, that's equivalent to the mark of the beast, right? Where in Bible prophecy, the devil tattoos his followers or his slaves or whatever. So, a lot of people are really going to impose that. And that's coming. That's an argument that we're going to have, and Bill Gates will be right out in front. So anyhow, there are a few more things that happened that were kind of notable. And one is that state and local governments' finances are just cratering. And California just announced that they're going to go from a big surplus. They were financially very healthy months ago, and now they're going to go from there to tens of billions of dollars in deficit in the coming year, with not any real end in sight, until everybody goes back to work, and until the stock market starts booming again, because California, loves its tech IPOs. That's where it gets a lot of its capital gain tax revenues, and IPOs have collapsed around the world. Nobody's taking companies public anymore, right? Which means first of all, that tax revenue ends for California, and second of all those unicorns that were out there. In other words, tech companies that hadn't gone public yet, but were worth billions of dollars. Nobody's talking about their valuation anymore, but they're a fraction of what they were before the pandemic, right? Because not only is whatever business you're in doing badly now, if you're one of these unicorn companies, unless you're an e-commerce company, and then in that case, you're doing fine. But if you wanted to go public, you couldn't go public. There's no mechanism to take you public anymore. So your value necessarily goes down because it can't be realized. And that's a big deal to California's economy too. So, I just published a thing about how, a lot of broke states and cities have, if they actually told the truth, they've been hoping for a big national disaster to allow them to fold in a request for a bailout of their pension plans into a general federal bailout program. Yeah. And you see these guys like, Illinois just asked for $41 billion or some crazy number like that, which is vastly more than the tax revenue they're going to lose because of the coronavirus this year. Mm-hmm. But they're asking for it. Yeah. And they think they might be able to get it because the federal government is so panicked. And so, it's just there's an awful lot going on out there that's being talked about but hasn't started yet. So we're going to have some really big resolutions to talk about as this goes on, because, they're going to bail out everybody in sight. They have to, but they're probably going to do it in a very chaotic way based on recent events. So we're going to see these monstrous numbers being tossed around.
Well,
And, literally trillions of dollars are going to be thrown at various industries out there. And what does that do? We're already seeing the debate in the mainstream media about what this does to the economy if we create all that new currency and toss it out there. So all of a sudden, people who never cared about debt in the past and didn't understand and didn't think it was important to understand monetary policy in the past are now trying to get their heads around, all right, if we double the money supply and we bail out all these companies by just printing new currency, and the government borrows, $4 trillion this year and $6 trillion next year. Does that mean anything? What does it mean if it means something? And some of them are coming to conclusions that it does indeed mean bad things. And so we're back to the whole, super or big currency crisis at some point, leading to a monetary reset. But it's just coming sooner now than it would have otherwise.
All right. Well, there we are. And what I find really interesting, so are they just going to give the money over to these states and not demand any accountability and not demand any reforms on both how the pensions are done, how the taxes are done, all these things? Because the states that are in the worst trouble, that are really, up the river up the creek without a paddle, are the ones that are the highest tax states. We're looking at New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, Illinois. You just go down the list here, John. The ones with the highest taxes, the most confiscatory rates, the worst regulations. Do you force them at gunpoint, literally, to reform all of these ill-thought programs? Do you just say, we'll give you the money, but you got to cut your pension outlays by 50%. You got to cut your labor by X, and you can't get, what kind of strings, I guess, is what I'm asking, are going to be attached?
They cannot do that, because then that means it's their fault when the pensions get cut. So, Trump and Mitch McConnell are trolling the Democrats right now by Trump saying, I don't see why we should have to bail out these badly run Democrat states. And Mitch McConnell saying, well, why don't we just let states go bankrupt and sort it out? Then, they know they can't do that, but they're having a blast driving the Democrat governors of these states crazy by saying stuff like that. But they cannot force those changes on states, because then that shifts the political issue over to them. See, right now, it's not their fault that Illinois' pension plan is going bankrupt, but it would be their fault if they said, yeah, you got to cut your pension in half. And Illinois does that, and then all of a sudden, all the policemen and the teachers are mad at Trump for telling Illinois it had to do that. So they have to figure out a way to prevent state bankruptcies while keeping the onus on governors and mayors to manage the problems that they created with their pension plans. And that's going to be tricky, but that's really what the federal government has to do, because they really don't want to just make it all go away. First of all, because it would take trillions of dollars to do that. And second of all, because it relieves the Democrats running these states of the political responsibility for their mistakes. Although, it's not all blue states. There are, Louisiana has issues and Kentucky has issues. So, yes. It's a bipartisan issue out there. But the really big name states that would tend to go bankrupt in the splashiest way, those are blue states. Those are Democrat-run yes. states. So this is a tricky strategic thing that Trump and his guys are looking at. But I think the important theme running through all this is that the Democrats are giving the Trump campaign unlimited material for attack ads. These guys, it's just an embarrassment of riches. And the pension thing is yet another attack ad subject, right? Where you go, well, you know what? Illinois never funded its pension plan. No. They've got
and New Jersey.
They've got 42,000 teachers and firefighters with pensions of more than $100,000 a year. And now they want a bailout from the rest of you. They want taxpayers to bail them out. Well, Is that right? That's the kind of commercial they can run. And they can do that with all the big states where Democrats are in charge. So, if you're a Republican political filmmaker right now, you've got to just be the happiest, most engaged person in the world, because it's like wealth is falling from the sky for you. Every day, every time you turn on the news or something like that, you see something else that would make an ideal commercial to run against the Democrats. So.
Yeah, isn't it the truth? And when you look at it, you just know that the solution here is going to be as bad or worse than the problem. What we wind up with, if they don't take this opportunity to reform, and we have no reason to believe that they will, because they never have before, it'll be just like the banks, too big to fail, and the states are too big to fail, and they just won't allow it to happen. And I'm not saying unmitigated cascading failure is necessarily the way to go about this. That's probably a bad idea, but effective restructuring really is called for here, John, and everything that the states do, from outsourcing, like New York, you can't outsource. It's not always a godsend to outsource, but you can't do anything that will cut into the power of the unions. And we'll just see if Trump's going to have the ultimate showdown with them, because if the states do go bust, who's going to get blamed for it? Probably the governors that are there. I mean, when you look at what Cuomo did during the pandemic, they sent elderly patients infected with the virus back to nursing homes to infect nursing homes and cause a mass die-off in some of these nursing homes. John, you just can't even believe the malfeasance that these people are capable of. Well,
this thing caught everybody off guard, and so the response was pretty chaotic. But you can't reform a system in the middle of a crisis. You just can't do that, because there are so many pressing needs that you've got to deal with. Like people are literally dying. So you aren't going to rewrite some arcane rule that governs something as far removed from our lives as a pension fund on the fly during an existential crisis. So you do the rewriting afterwards, like after the Depression is when we introduced antitrust laws and, broke up the big banks and things like that, and then instituted Social Security, blah, blah, blah. We did all that stuff afterwards, not during the really intense part of the crisis, when they were just trying to get people back to work. And because this one is happening at an even more accelerated rate, we're not going to be able to do any of the things that would prevent this from happening again until after the fact. So right now it's all, and so the answer about pensions and the airlines and pretty much everything else is we're going to bail them out one way or another. We're going to make sure they don't cease to exist, and whatever the cost is. Because remember, it's all just make-believe money to these guys. You just type a number in and hit send, and that's the money. You made it and then it went somewhere. So 5 trillion is the same as 2 trillion, and 20 trillion is the same as 5 trillion for these guys. And we will see the big numbers pretty soon. We'll see $20 trillion in some form, loan guarantees and deficit spending and direct bailouts. All of that stuff is going to combine to be numbers that are just astounding compared to any previous period in human history. And they will not save us.
Yeah,
because
we know that.
Because this system can't be saved in its current form. So it's, we're going to do all this stuff, and then some aspect of the financial system will tank and take the rest of it down for the ride. Then we will hit rock bottom, and then we'll do all this, renegotiating of old contracts and restructuring of old ways of doing business. That'll happen, assuming we survive intact. It's conceivable, at least, that we get some of that right. We end up in better shape than we are now. But that's a story for a future time. Right now, we're in the middle of the crisis.
Yeah.
And it's all about what are we going to do to keep these people from starving over here and to keep this giant industry from going bankrupt and keep the state from having to declare bankruptcy. Yes. That's what's going to be on their plate through the election and into 2021. And can you imagine that we're having a presidential election while all this is going on too?
That's crazy.
That's just astounding.
And we got look who's running against each other.
I know, and we have a terrible election on top of everything else. Yeah, really. It's my wife hates Trump, but she is appalled that her choice is between two creepy old white men. So she referred to Trump as the devil we know the other day. So like from her point of view, even though she hates Trump, it almost doesn't matter who wins this election because it's hard to see a difference between these two guys. So, yeah, and probably a lot of people who are not Trump fans still kind of feel the same way. When they look at Biden, they think, God damn it, we could have had Bernie Sanders, we could have had Elizabeth Warren, we could have had these legitimate people. And instead, we've got this guy who even before the sexual assault thing came out, was still just an embarrassment of riches. Yeah, I mean, he was a liar. He got kicked out of his first presidential campaign for plagiarism.
Yeah.
So there's your first attack ad, right? You do that.
He lied about, he said he graduated top of his class at law school and he graduated at the bottom.
Yeah. There's your second attack.
Oh, there's so many.
One a week for the last 2 months leading into the election. And then all the corruption in his family,
everyone's gotten rich.
His son and his brother are both good for at least 2 or 3 attack ads each, which takes you through like 2 weeks, and it just goes on and on. So this is going to be a brutal, and that's not even the debates. When Trump gets to look him in the eye and bring all this stuff up, which he will, Trump will just have a ball going, all right, now, what did you think when you were plagiarizing Neil Kinnock back in the day? I mean, did you know you did that? Did it just slip your mind? Or did you do it on purpose? He's going to do all that stuff. So this is going to be really
anything. He will say absolutely anything because he's Donald Trump. And he can, and it's going to be, and he's got a target-rich environment, let's face it, because we all know about Biden and creepy, sleepy, peepee Joe there, boy.
Well, all those pictures of women cringing as he touches them, and there's a bunch of those, and some of them were like little girls. It is,
there's
that
montages.
Might be all you need to do, really. Yeah,
there's whole montages about them.
Yeah.
And kissing women on the lips. Like, who the heck does that? I mean, my daughters won't even let me kiss them on the lips of a stranger. It's like, forget it. So, so all that's going to happen at the same time when we have to decide whether to actually have a physical election. Yeah.
Where people stand in line and touch the same doorknobs and the same pencils and breathe on each other and stuff, or try to do some technically extremely difficult kind of election where we do it all virtually, right? We mail in ballots or we do something online, and the amount of corruption and incompetence and just chaos that will come from that, will just add to the general chaos in the country. This is all right.
I think we'll let it go at that. If you got any questions, comments, feedback, just let us know. And the email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feeds @KerryLutz. Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. John's site, dollarcollapse.com. Make sure you sign up for both of our newsletters. Just one other thing, John, I did a thing. Jimmy Dore, Cenk Uygur, and Crystal Ball. They're like 3 liberal progressive pundits all went all in on Bernie. And, look, Bernie, I'll just briefly summarize it, John. Bernie was never a real candidate. He wasn't one in 2016. He was a stalking horse that enabled Hillary Clinton to look more mainstream than she might otherwise be and to distract the attention from Trump. And you knew that he wasn't real when they get up on the first debate and he says something to the effect of, enough about her damn email server. Let's get on to the important things. To cede the high ground, the moral issues, and a major advantage you have over your opponents, it's not real. And then the other thing happened this time where he said he wouldn't talk about Joe Biden's lack of mental capacity or his corruption, his family corruption, which is out there, which are two things he could have beat Biden over the head and won with. So to me, they're complete dupes, and they are completely, they're just so naive and innocent. And yeah, they might have said things that were critical about Bernie's strategy, but they didn't understand that his strategy was never to win. Bernie is like the guy in the nursing home that's always bitching about the oatmeal being too lumpy, but will never get up and make a bowl of oatmeal for himself because he just likes to bitch about it.
Well, see, this is a big problem for the mainstream Democrats because Bernie Sanders did have a following. Mm-hmm. You know, he was the only guy who had rallies that were similar to Trump's, where, 10,000 enthusiastic people would show up. And so that's a must-have segment of the electorate for Joe Biden. But how many of them are going to work hard for him or, knock on doors or even, in a lot of cases, show up to vote? Because why would they for somebody who they perceive to have stolen the election from Bernie Sanders, So it's hard for the Democrats to mobilize their base this time. And it's very easy for the Republicans to mobilize their base because they are enraged about what they're seeing out there. And that's to Trump's advantage. But, the middle of the road people, middle of the road voters apparently haven't liked what they've seen with the, go ahead and try injecting disinfectant and see if that, that kind of stuff, where they think Trump is saying crazy stuff. So apparently his polling numbers with suburban middle of the road voters is that they're going down. At the same time, he's really solidified his base. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because the one hurts him, the other helps him. And meanwhile, it's almost the opposite with the Democrats. Like Biden is doing well with moderate voters, but his left-wing base in the party, which is really the energy in the Democrat Party, detests him.
Yeah, for good reason. Let's face it. For very good reason.
For a lot of good reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
The Democrats really are turning into two parties. So it wouldn't be a surprise after this election if we didn't get an American Socialist Party where all the Bernie Sanders voters go.
Absolutely. There's two parties. It's become the party of two parties. One is the let them eat cake party, and the other is we don't have any money to buy any cake party. Right?
Yeah.
That's what it's come down to.
And, if this election had, instead of Biden, it had Bernie Sanders with AOC as his running mate.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how much fun this election would be?
God.
This would have been a blast,
But, one thing you got to realize about Bernie, he was never vetted. He was never in a pressure-cooked election. And the closest he got was with Hillary, and that was all rigged anyway because he was never supposed to win it. But we don't need to go over that fallow ground because it is what it is now. But I'm just commenting. Anyway, take a look at the YouTube channel. I did this YouTube yesterday. I got to say, John, it was my best video. We got to do some video next week. Now that I've mastered the green screen and I've upped my audio quality, everything else, we're going to do video next week. Okay.
Okay. Look forward to it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.